Welcome to Serenity is Addictive, where we explore the benefits of 12-step spirituality in depth. Let's get ready to dive in deep into this next episode. Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to talk to my friend Sandra. And she's going to explain a little bit about herself. And Sandra does a lot of work around emotions and just a whole bunch of stuff. She's been a really good friend to me, and she's helped me in a lot of ways, especially as a man, connect with my emotions and come up with tools to kind of help me process them in a way that's more meaningful or helpful, where I don't get so dragged down by them or I don't just stuff them. And so, she's really good at using her own experience and her insights. And she's been a tremendous help to me. And I hope she'll be a tremendous help to our community here. Sandra, welcome.
Thank you, Joe.
Anything else that you want to add about yourself as a little quick intro of, 2-3 minutes?
Okay, well, let's see. So I guess I could talk about just kind of growing up highly sensitive and being a person who stimuli really were, I feel things really deeply. And so in addition to that, I'm German heritage. So the approach, at least traditionally, has been kind of, I think there's been a lot of recovery in the German culture in Germany, but sort of the traditional German culture is like, pull yourself together. If you show any emotion whatsoever, in fact, that phrase was used with me when I expressed some sadness this weekend with my family over Christmas. And it's like that attitude, I kind of internalized that. And so I was having a lot of emotions because of my high sensitivity, and I was squashing them down, or needing to go to therapy quite a bit to deal with them. And then, some things unraveled for me health-wise in 2006, I had cancer and had to have surgery. And I sort of reformed myself a little bit because at that point, I was spending a lot of late nights and doing a lot of volunteering and working 40 hours a week. And it's kind of a mess. I was like self-sacrificing myself for the things that I felt like I should do to fix myself, because I was kind of the family scapegoat, being that, I was in a family full of thinkers and I was a highly sensitive feeler. I kind of got the message that, I needed to fix myself. Right. And so I was doing a lot of personal development work, and it was really great on the cognitive end of things. And I really learned to be responsible for my own thinking and the stories that I was telling myself. But the emotional part didn't really start to happen until I got into 12-step recovery. And that happened in 2011 as a result of I was engaged, and the engagement ended. And I decided I needed to sort myself out. And I sort of had this little tongue-in-cheek marriage ceremony to myself in 2011, and then ended up working for a really workaholic, well, I shouldn't do his inventory, but a very ambitious person. And we were totally overcommitted as a unit at work. And I was also, trying to do all kinds of things to support my health. So I was getting acupuncture 3 times a week, going to Bikram yoga 3 times a week. I was singing in a chorus. And then, on top of that, I was training 300 people as part of a team over the course of a summer, like 3 months, and in groups of 25. So that was like a huge effort. And completely rewriting the curriculum, and going to professional development courses, and taking a university extension series of 3 courses that I never ended up finishing because of getting Epstein-Barr virus. And that's when I realized I got to get serious about this health thing. I mean, I was
Mm,
doing better than I had been prior to my cancer thing, but I just really hadn't locked in the self-care.
mm,
And it was kind of, it held my feet to the fire. Like I really had, this was 2014, and I was still like 5 years away from having my career with a government, as a government analyst, pay off in terms of being vested, having being 50 years old, having 20 years in, all these different milestones hadn't been met yet. And so it was really the impetus I needed to get serious about my healthcare, or well, overall, like everything.
mm,
There's different fellowships that I participated in, and most say, the 12th step is like, practice these principles in all of our affairs.
mm,
And there's a fellowship that affairs means something else, and so they like to use all areas of our life. And so that kind of meant, there's this book called Marry Yourself First,
mm,
about taking care of yourself. And it's only a little section, but they use this sort of balance wheel diagram with a sort of a little different than just the pie diagram. But that
mm,
all kind of got me thinking, like, I've been focused on self-care in intellectual areas and physical areas and different things, but I wasn't really looking at what I needed emotionally or socially, um,
mm,
or spiritually.
mm,
I kind of grew up going to church every once in a while, like on holidays and stuff like that, and not really having a spiritual toolbox at my disposal. Although every once in a while I was told to pray if I was feeling upset or something, but I didn't really see it modeled or know how
mm.
to do it or anything like that. So um, that kind of got me really serious about my recovery. And in 2016 I participated in a TEDx event,
Mm.
and James Doty was speaking about, I think it was it hacking your brain for happiness? But at any rate, he was talking about the autonomic nervous system and how it's a balance between the fight or flight and the rest and digest.
Mm,
And I realized, because he used the word heal in there somewhere,
mm,
and what I got was that I had all these like low grade health issues that were happening.
mm,
Um, allergies, asthma,
mhm,
but mild, everything mild, but I
mm,
could never really get away from them. And so, part of it is high sensitivity.
mm.
But the other part was self-care. Like I was taking care of myself like I was a Volkswagen, but I'm actually a Ferrari, So it's like, if the average person needs 7 hours and 40 minutes of sleep, I need more sleep than that. And what I
Mm,
learned to do is not just, go to books, but to go to my body sensations and emotions to guide me to the next right action in terms of
mm.
self-care in all areas of my life.
Wow.
And for me,
Wow.
that's, they talk about the higher power in 12 step. And, I think I believe that, there's some force out there that makes me breathe. And when I'm dead, I don't breathe anymore. So there's something that is beyond my understanding. But, the God of my understanding is kind of that secular sciency kind of
Mm,
like energy of the universe, the force of life and
beautiful.
everything. And how I connect with that force is my body.
Mm,
And so I have kind of developed morning and evening routines to kind of cover, and we were talking earlier about front loading my day. So I sort of learned to identify what I needed, and so I would put that in my schedule, like my weekly schedule or my morning and evening routine, so that everything that I got prescribed from all my doctors
mm,
and specialists and stuff, of all
mm,
the little things I was at that point was like, okay, I got to get serious about this. I go to specialists, and then I get the prescriptions, and then I never do them. And it's like, I've got to just like make the rubber meet the road here.
mm.
And so that led me to develop morning and evening routines, and sort of use my spiritual tools in as part of that.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to stop you there, but like that was so powerful. You just mentioned a bunch of things we could probably do like 30 podcasts explore. But that's like why I was so excited to have Sandra on this podcast in this episode, to just get like, I hope this is this is the intro to do many more with you, Sandra, because
I
you
love
just
that.
have a remarkable, your experience is just so profound. And I think, you know, from what you just described as your background and all the things you've had to learn and you're still learning, like there's just so much. I see how you've helped me tremendously, and I see how you've helped others. And it's a beautiful thing. And I'm glad you mentioned 12 steps because, you know, I'm in 12-step spirituality as well. And I love it. And it's also cool, like to hear the different people and how they associate it different. Like even the way you named your higher power was really fascinating. You know, and I think it's awesome, right? And I also love, like you mentioned, the emotions, like connecting with your higher power and feeling it in your body. And for me, one of the most beautiful things about 12-step recovery to me, and it's a gauge, is like, is that relationship with the higher power, first of all, for me, a loving higher power, loves me intimately, cares for me very deeply, wants the absolute best for me. If it's not that, I'm not going to turn my life over to some, you know, wicked judge or a cruel master or someone who wants me to do something that's totally different from the way I feel I've been made, right? Like
Mhm.
this higher power has my best interest in heart. But what you said, what I found really beautiful in my own experience is I need that relationship to be experiential and authentic, not just in my head, because I'm very good at staying in my head. You know, I'm very good. I'm a deep feeler as well. I think I'm a deep thinker. I know Sandra was the one who introduced me to even the concept of a highly sensitive person, and I feel that I am as well. And it's just cool, like to get all these little pieces of the puzzle as you kind of think about, like, who am I, what am I, and how am I wired, right? Because we're all wired a little differently. And I love your Ferrari analogy as well. It's like whatever we happen to be, the more we know about ourselves and what we really need, we can learn to reparent, to give ourselves that. And I thought it was interesting. I'd never heard about that, remarrying yourself or marrying yourself.
For yourself first. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. But I wanted to start from one of the things you said at the beginning. You mentioned the thinking and the feeling versus you were a feeler and you came from a family with thinkers. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like what is that? Yeah, help me understand that a little bit better.
Yeah. I'm trained uh, a branch of counseling that is directed at careers and vocational
Mm,
rehabilitation. And
mm,
so one of the things that we do in that profession is we assess people to see who the person is, to see where they fit in the world of work.
mm,
And so one of the things I learned about was the Myers-Briggs
mhm,
type indicator, which is based on the work of Carl Jung, and a couple of women came up with this. Myers and Briggs came up
mhm,
with this assessment that a lot of people sort of debunk it and stuff, but
mhm.
it's like, yeah, I get it. You don't want to use it for everything, but I find that when I really deeply connect with people and feel like I've known them for a long time, they tend to be people who share um, traits from that indicator.
Mm,
And
mm,
so intuitive feeling seems to
mm,
be the core of it. There's the introvert, extrovert,
mhm.
the sensing,
Okay.
intuitive,
So
feeling,
so a
thinking.
thinker is like what? How would you describe a thinker? Like from
I
what
think
you're
there's somebody
understanding?
who, yeah, I think is somebody who primarily is in their head,
Mm,
um, and operates in life from an intellectual
okay.
standpoint.
And a
Um,
feeler is what?
Somebody who's more um, uh, internal and external, like is
Is it more emotional or
more
would
intuitive,
that be wrong?
emotional. Yeah, more
Emotional?
intuitive
Okay.
and emotional.
Mm,
And yeah, relates to the world more through an emotional framework
mm,
rather than an intellectual framework.
mm, mm. That's really interesting. Yeah, it's funny you talk about the Myers-Briggs because I like Myers-Briggs, you know, for like you said, for what it's worth, right? It's not the savior of mankind, but it definitely gave me some insights about myself. And I've taken a lot of different types of assessments, and they all have, you know. And I remember seeing some YouTube where someone was really downgrading the Myers-Briggs and kind of beating it up. And I thought they overdid that, you know. But I also know that it's almost like it's not enough, right? Like there's been other assessments that I feel go a little deeper instead of like grouping everyone into I think their categories are eight, right? Like I think are eight.
They're four different
Oh, four. Okay.
uh continuums that they place you on.
Okay.
One is the spectrum of from in uh introvert to extrovert,
Yep.
intuition versus sensing. So it's like,
Yes.
the scientist tends to be the sensing thinker,
Mm, okay.
and I live in a scientist town, and I have scientists in my family. So um
Yeah, 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 yeah. No,
but
that's pretty cool.
I mean,
Okay.
and we need them, right? But it's just
Yeah.
like, it's how I understand why I sort of became the family scapegoat.
Mm,
Is because, it's like whenever I took a class, there's always these classes, working for the state, of how to deal with difficult people, and usually the
mm,
crux of the class is that, here's a type indicator, and you're probably having difficulty with someone because they're the opposite type of you. Like,
mhm.
on one of them, the thing was get it right, get it done,
Right.
get along, and get by or something. And so it was like I was the get it right person, and a lot of my managers were get it done people. So there's this
Mhm.
this inherent conflict. So yeah, so just being the odd one out,
Mm.
is kind of a very familiar.
That's that's really interesting. I want to get your thoughts on this, and I feel like we said we were going to talk about emotions, but you know what? Who knows? This is maybe taking on a different life of its own. I I um I thought about that, like the different types of personalities. Well, first of all, every human being is totally unique. There will never be another Sandra. There'll never be another me. Like we're all very unique, but we have these characteristics where we can kind of bond over our similarities. To your point, whether using Myers-Briggs, other things, nationalities, the favorite types of music. But what I think is interesting is when we let one type of person, even in an organization, tend to dominate, and usually it is that be bold, be brief person tends to dominate, right? They run the team, and then the team has to do it their way instead of having like a mutual respect for the different talents and really letting each one serve each other to collaboratively get the best good. That's very rare in any type of team, but when that happens, it's a very beautiful thing. But your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think there's in 12 step, we do this thing called a group conscience.
Mm,
They're called business meetings a lot of times, but I like calling them the group conscious meeting, because it's like the blind man and the elephant
mm-hmm,
analogy, where it's like, I know certain parts of an issue,
mm-hmm,
and it's given me a lot of peace of mind to just surrender to that group conscience and be like, okay, if I put a problem on the table that I'm concerned about, then everybody's going to have their perspective on it. And I used to be very positional, and now I sort of surrender to that. And I love what Desmond Tutu said, that
mm,
God made us all different so that we would need each other. And the
mm,
God word has kind of been something I've kind of been like,
mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm,
it's kind of used to like make
mm,
people wrong, and like,
mm,
well, I know God, and
mm-hmm,
you don't know
mm-hmm,
God, or whatever,
mm-hmm,
and the authoritative thing, like
mm-hmm,
those of us who have dealt with authority figures, sort of, in that sort of authoritarian, you know uh, uh, drill sergeant kind of mode. um, we think of God in that sort of, with whatever flavor of authority figure we grew up with. And
yes.
given how much the Germanic culture is dominant in the United States, if you look at a map, there's this colored map
Mm,
of the different ethnicities, and most counties in the United States, um, especially in the North, Midwest, and whatnot, are very German dominant. And
mm,
I have an immigrant from that culture in my family, and traveled there on a regular basis. And so, it's like, oh, this person isn't just impatient. as a person, it's like when I was at a train station traveling in Europe one time, I was like, everybody just like if the train is 2 minutes late, everybody's like pacing around and like, and they have these stop sign like interactive data driven stop sign things that tell you how fast you have to go to get through the light because you're too impatient to like sit there and wait for the light to change, you know. So
That's
it's
funny.
it's like there's these characteristics and to kind of bring it around to emotions.
Mm,
One of the characteristics of the culture that I've been steeped in is very emotionally
mm,
resistant. Like it's like you just if you feel an emotion, it's time to go do something or have a beer or
mm,
get
mm,
go shopping or what have you, right? And there's like not a lot of space to just sit with emotions and figure out what to do with them, and there's no um not a lot of patience with strong emotions. And part of that I think was trauma.
mm,
There's this
mm,
multi-generational trauma thing where members of my family were in Germany at the time of World War II, and they lost everything and they were refugees and they had to live in one room of another family's home, and were then sent to a a very affluent school because they were very bright. But I think there was kind of that, having to put on the uh, a happy face kind of thing,
mhm, mhm,
and this sort of snobby pretense kind of thing, and so there's this very defended
mm,
vibe
mm,
because of the unrecovered trauma from all that. That makes vulnerability really difficult.
mm,
Um, and For me, what I've learned is that I was trying to get friends by being impressive and having degrees and accomplishments and knowing a lot of stuff. But really, it's the wrong currency. It's like going to France and trying to spend, you know, uh, yen or something.
mm,
It's like you
mm,
don't get love by impressing people. You get love
mhm,
by being vulnerable.
mm,
And a lot of
mm,
vulnerability is about me knowing how I'm feeling, what I'm needing,
mm,
and sharing those things vulnerably with people. That kind of comes out of my study of nonviolent communication, also called compassionate communication,
mm,
that Marshall Rosenberg came up with. And so there's this
mm,
way that I forget exactly when it happened and what the major epiphany was, but it was like, what nonviolent communication does is it trains me to express my feelings and needs and make requests. And what I realized was, wow, that really works internally too. Like if I'm self-parenting myself,
mm,
inquire with myself, when I'm getting emotional and sort of regressing emotionally into sort of an emotional brain state,
mm.
which I'd love to get into that at some point too.
Yeah,
The Four Brains,
yeah.
the Whole Brain Living book that um, Jill Bolte Taylor, who did the Stroke of Insight TED Talk,
Mm,
came out with. But yeah, that deep emotional brain kind of takes over, and learning to sort of have a more mindful approach to when those feelings come up.
mm,
So I love the 12-step acronym HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And there's a
mhm,
phrase from the AA literature that I've heard a lot of, pause when agitated or doubtful. So, there's a lot of like Jerry Springery kind of, uh, dramatic, like, get people worked up for dramatic effect and so forth in the culture, the
mm,
mainstream culture. And so that is like reacting, right? It's like
mm,
to
mm,
you incite people into a reaction. So to be a mindful emotionally, I'm learning to pause when agitated or doubtful instead of
mm,
reacting like, somebody says something and I get triggered and just, do whatever. um End up feeling angry, shameful, fearful, whatever. I kind of, instead of doing what I used to do, which was, something happens, I feel something, And then I start to attach, like, why would I feel sad? Oh, I look at all the sad things that have ever happened to me in my life, and then I get all psychological and depressed and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've learned to do is to view, okay, hunger,
Mm,
the need, what need does hunger point to? I
mm,
need food. I need, maybe I'm thirsty, really,
mm-hmm,
sometimes
mm-hmm,
misread as hunger. Um, Angry, what's going on, what standard has been violated. There's a great section in Tony Robbins' book, Awaken the Giant Within, that talks about emotions as action signals.
mm,
And it's embarrassing how long it took me to actually kind of understand it, um, from in a practical way. But I knew that there was gold there, so I would look at it over and over, over the
mm,
years, when I was feeling emotions. And there's a meaning behind every emotion. So
mm,
usually, anger is some standard's been violated, and there's usually something underneath it, like there's hurt or sadness or fear of some kind under anger. So just knowing, what needs that anger is pointing to in
mm,
a moment is kind of an intuitive and individualized thing that it's hard to really, give people an encyclopedia to know for themselves, but just some examples,
mm,
um, might be helpful. And then, from getting from the emotion to the need, then I find it helpful to look at my tools,
mm-hmm,
in any given situation. And, depending on the area of life that it is, like, um, the Workaholics Anonymous, is one fellowship that I have participated in.
mm-hmm,
There's a really great toolbox there, where it's like, well, obviously any person who's in 12 step will recognize the tools of meetings and fellowship and
mm-hmm,
sponsorship and, those sorts of things. Meetings, if I didn't mention meetings,
mm-hmm,
those are tools to get my social needs met, my need for safe social, connection met. So that would help with the lonely feeling, right?
mm,
The need that loneliness points to is that I need to connect, usually,
mm,
or I need some empathy, or something like that. And so those tools in the toolbox of every 12-step program, the meetings, the sponsorship, whatever, are for that empathy and connection,
mm,
or whatever other needs kind of fall in the social part of the needs pie. Um, and then tired, that's rest.
mm,
Sleep is usually, the biggest one, but relaxation. Um, and there's this great article, that I saw. I can't remember the source of it, but I think it's based on a TED talk.
mm,
And it talks about, 7 kinds of rest,
mm,
which was really interesting because I'd kind
mm,
of identified that in every area on the needs pie, emotional, social, spiritual, intellectual, physical, all those areas, there can be abuse in those areas.
mm-hmm,
And there can be, neglect in those areas.
mm,
And there can be rest in those areas,
mm-hmm,
and so, identifying those different things has been really useful.
mm,
So yeah, so then, with the Workaholics Anonymous, you can kind of expand. It's not just halts. There aren't just those four.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
There's different body sensations and different emotions.
mm,
So overwhelm is a big one for me.
mm-hmm.
As a workaholic, I was working for love in all the wrong relationships, tolerating, relationships that weren't really working for me, and, uh, just ignoring that because I am the scapegoat, right? I don't deserve, to, be peaceful. So I have to tolerate these people because I'm a scapegoat, and nobody will love me
Mm,
because I'm
mm,
a scapegoat. And so I'm not going to be able to find other people who would love me. And, these are the people that I have to kind of cling to and make it work. Um,
mm,
so that whole, um, gambit, um, I'm sort of working my way out of that. Um,
mm,
and, my self parenting is a big part of that. Um, and just, getting to the point where I can, be mindful of what those emotions are telling me. identify the feeling, identify the need, and then
Mm,
reach for a healthy tool.
I
Instead
love
of,
that.
you
I,
know,
I love that, Sandra. Yeah, I remember when you first shared that with me, that concept, the need, the tool. Wait, so say it again. So no, the emotion, the need, the tool, right?
Mhm.
And I love that. And I think you even had something written that you shared with me in the past that kind of gave some examples. And what I personally love about that is I've been like sometimes I feel the emotion. I'd feel the emotion and I'd get like totally depressed, right? I feel the emotion and I like want to like go crazy. Like the emotion almost like enslaves me. Or I get like hyper morbidly into the emotion way too much. And maybe as a highly sensitive person, I'm just kind of thinking out loud with you, that could be one of the consequences. So but then if I ignore it and I stuff them and I just push on, right? It's kind of like my ego, like just saying, no, I got to be a robot. I'm a machine. I don't have time for these emotions. Oh, that's baby stuff. So it's not respecting the way I'm wired. And back to your Ferrari analogy, it's like the Ferrari needs, well, it's not an electric Ferrari, right? It needs an oil change. We need certain things. You need windshield wiper fluid. And to just say, I don't need that stuff, the Ferrari's going to stop working. So there's certain needs of self-care. And I also thought it was beautiful listening to you. I got the whole context, really just how holistic we are as human beings and how each part plays a part with something else. And I always use the puzzle analogy, and I don't think I ever ran this by you, but I even think of recovery, it's a puzzle. So there's all these things that are out of whack. And the more we kind of do these different things, whether it's inventories, all the stuff through our experience, we're putting these different things that we never had that were out of whack in place. And we start feeling better and like emerging more and more as our true self. So it's a process of self-discovery, but it's fascinating how each little component plays a role. And I think it makes sense, right? Like if I don't brush my teeth or floss, I'm probably going to lose, I'm going to have gum disease. That's going to impact me when I have toothaches, right? And something else. Or if I hurt my ankle, if I don't, go get it treated, it's going to mess me up in my basketball game. Like everything plays a part. And
Mhm.
you bring up trauma, when you even think about the emotions from trauma, that's something that's been really new for me. And there's been so many things you mentioned, like, and I know we have to wrap up, but we'll have to do more ones. Like a few things that come to mind for me. I'd love to talk about what you said about the word God and the higher power, because one of the mentors I really love, Thomas Keating, talks about the total reality of what you said, that because of the abuses of certain types of religions and the way they've used that word in an authoritative stance and a controlling stance, there's been a lot of psychological damage done on people, even within those religions and outside of those religions, where they're seeing this God as this authoritarian tyrant. And because of that, it prevents them from having a relationship with this power. And you bring up 12 steps, like, thank God for 12 steps, because 12 steps says you don't have to believe anything you don't want to. You just need to be open to something, an inner consciousness. You can call it the ocean, you can call it your dog, you can call it your toothbrush, you can call it your Twinkie sandwich, like you can call it whatever the hell you want to, right? And you can be free to change it as you go or not. So I
Mhm.
definitely want to do one on that. I want to do one with you on trauma. um and I know you mentioned some other things, like everything you said, I would love to do like a specific podcast. But the big great thing here is I finally got you on, and we got
That's
the community to get to meet you.
awesome. So yeah, I just wanted to mention a couple projects I've got going on. So um, I'm basically working on a book for highly sensitive men, and the plan is to developing a curriculum as part of a new meeting in a 12-step program that I'm starting on social and emotional recovery. And the basic goal of it is to um, it's called the Mantastic Project. So what I know from being the only girl in my generation in my immediate first cousins is that guys really don't get their needs met. in a lot of ways. And, my path to getting my needs met has been through my emotions. And I know that emotions are actively suppressed, and, people are bullied out of them, and all these things. And particularly, boys are just, like if they cry, I've heard stories like men cry or boys cry and they're like put in a dress and tied to a tree in the front yard. It's like, here, have some shame. you know and so that kind of thing has really disconnected men and given the um the male power structure is very persistent. I feel like, both my empathy for men having the tools, and all the, like, active shooter events and all of these things, and, like, murder suicides and all of these things are symptoms of men not getting their needs met, and not being allowed to be human. It's like this role. It's like we've had women's liberation, and so for me it's like Fantastic is about men's liberation, men getting their tools that they need to get their needs met and be a full, well-rounded human being, instead of a manifestation of this inhuman role that they're being squeezed into with every advertisement and every media image, and all the different things that are basically making life such a pressure cooker for men. And that's kind of my focus of the stuff I'm putting together, is to make it men friendly, like to speak in terms that men will find more accessible, and to have conversations in ways that are man friendly. So I really thank you for your partnership and your courage to be out there and upfront about your what's going on with you, and how the things that I've been talking about. It's like it's not an easy thing to sort of be in the crosshairs of guys, when they don't agree with what you're saying. So thank you for being somebody who gets what I'm trying to do and is supportive. And I am so happy to have your partnership in this project.
Thanks so much, Sandra. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's been great. And so, yeah, I definitely want to, we have to have another session on just Fantastic, because I think what you're trying to do there is powerful. And, two things recently that came to mind. I'm reading a book by Lenny Kravitz, who I love, called Let Love Rule. And he specifically said his dad, when he started like crying one time, said, like, don't you dare cry. Like, I'll give you something to cry about. Got home and told the mother, like, your son's a crybaby, like had this didn't allow him. Thankfully, Lenny had a whole support group that did allow him to express that, right? But a lot of people don't. And so that's really fascinating. And the last thing I'll say, I just saw this last night, Sandra. Shia LaBeouf is an actor. And long story short, he was on a podcast called The Real Ones. And from what I gather, he must have done something abusive to a girlfriend, a woman in the past, blah, 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 blah. And then I think he got like cancel culture. Long story short, he had a breakdown. Now he's in 12 steps and he's talking about his experience with AA. But, he's a person who, like, when you think about like emotions and stuff, well, you said something really beautiful. The person who does that podcast, The Real Ones, was on Joe Rogan. And he was saying, like, when this guy, Shia LaBeouf, got canceled, everyone treated him like the devil. And everyone was like, you don't have a person on your show. Like, don't give this guy an ounce of hope. And then he felt the same thing. The person who runs that podcast, I can't think of his name, but he was saying, when you start hitting a woman, like, that's where I draw the line. Like, I can't be down with you. Even though I love this guy, I respect this guy, I consider myself a friend to this guy. Long story short, he had him on the podcast and he said something that you said, Sandra. He said, I've talked to women who've suffered this abuse, but what I came out of it was women need help, obviously, when they've been abused, and places to go and we need all that. But they said what's really lacking is who's to help these men? Because, deep down, something's gone wrong with these men. It's not that they're like inherently evil. It means they're really suffering. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he said is like, those people need a lot of help. And that's what I love what you just said there. Like, these men are not evil, right? Like we just need help. We
Yeah.
didn't get that. And especially, past generations of men, it was even worse. And so now there's been a change, which is really cool. Anyways, I know we're taking a lot of time, but no, this was awesome. We will have you on again. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Sandra.
You're welcome. Looking forward to it.
All right. Adios.
Thank you for listening to Serenity is Addictive. Until the next time we meet, keep trudging your road to happy destiny. Peace.